A rust-stained metal box, half buried in thawing snow, clicks open, the metal teeth grinding against ice as a thin layer of wind-slicked powder lifts and settles on the ground. Inside, a stack of sealed envelopes glints dull gray in the weak winter light. You are the analyst who just uncovered a budget line.
2.4 billion rubles.
Assigned to Project VOGON on July 3, 2019. Why would the Soviet-era Secret Service spend the equivalent of a small city on a single field test? By the end you'll see that number was a cover for something far more sinister. What secret experiment killed 9 seasoned hikers on the Kharovskaya Pass? Igor Petrov tightened the straps on his rucksack the night before departure, humming a folk tune his grandmother taught him, the low notes reverberating off the concrete walls of his cramped apartment. The faint scent of pine-scented soap drifted from the bathroom as he double-checked the map, his fingertips lingering over the ridgelines like a carpenter feeling the grain of wood. Anna Kuznetsova, meticulous to a fault, ran her thumb along the seams of their high-altitude tents, pausing to smooth a stray thread while the faint glow of a single lamp cast amber shadows across her concentrated face. Sergei Makarov whispered a joke to calm his nerves, his breath forming a brief mist in the cold air. The laugh cracked like thin ice but steadied his pulse. Together with 2 Belarusians, Dmitry Sokolov, who never left his mother's kitchen without a spare bottle of tea, the tin clinking softly in his pocket, and Elena Ivanova, a former ski instructor whose hands still bore the calluses of years on powdery slopes, and 4 foreign tourists, Mark Reynolds, an amateur photographer who never missed a sunrise, his camera always hanging at his side like a second eye. Sarah Whitaker, a linguist with a habit of annotating every trail sign, her notebook filled with cramped Cyrillic scribbles. Lucas Becker, a German engineer who carried a pocket-sized compass that clicked with each step, and Hiroshi Tanaka, a Japanese photojournalist who always wore a red scarf that fluttered in the wind. Their expedition log read like a checklist: 120 kilometers, 6 days, satellite phones, emergency rations worth 78,000 rubles, and Vostok Outfitters receipts stamped June 10.
Within 6 hours.
They'd be dead. What did they think they were heading into? The Ural summer of 2019 was unforgiving. Daylight stretched past midnight, the sky a bruised violet, while wind howled through the jagged ridge of Mira Peak, rattling the thin metal of the campsite. Temperature dropped 20 degrees every hour after sunset, each breath crystallizing in the air like tiny glass beads. On June 15, while the party crossed a narrow spine of rock, their GPS vanished as if the sky itself swallowed the signal, the tiny screen flickering to black and staying dead. A sudden static burst erupted from their satellite phones, a harsh crackle that seemed to echo off the stone faces around them. In Perm, a radio operator heard a cracked voice: "We hear voices, they're speaking through the wind." The word stretched, ragged, then fell into a breathless silence that lasted 15 seconds before the line went dead. The group vanished. Why would the world's most experienced hikers lose every line of communication on a ridge that had been mapped for decades? 2 weeks later, rescue teams stumbled upon the bodies near a secluded valley, each marked by identical deep incisions across forearms and neck, an age-old binding known as crocodile's knot. The cold wind whispered through the trees as they lifted each corpse, the steel blades of their knives catching the weak light. Autopsies at the Russian Academy of Sciences revealed a lethal dose of pyrrolizidine alkaloids, a plant toxin that should never exist at that altitude. The forensic report listed a concentration of 0.9 mg per liter, far above the 0.05 mg fatal threshold. The mystery deepened when investigators uncovered a hidden cache, a weatherproof case containing a sealed vial labeled Zarya 42, a notebook detailing a psychotronic protocol, and a handwritten order signed by Colonel Viktor Alexeyev, head of the Special Operations Division. If you want to see where this goes, hit subscribe, because what comes next changes everything. Why would a Soviet-era psychotronics division be hunting a civilian hiking party in 2019? Project VOGON, archived under the codename Operation Echo, was originally launched in 1967 to test neural resonance devices designed to induce suggestibility. Declassified memos show a 1974 incident in Kalin where a covert team used a similar toxin to silence a dissident. A 1992 Yakutsk trial later exposed a network that sold mind control kits to private corporations. The July 3, 2019 memo, annotated with the phrase, field validation, lethal dosing, covert deployment, linked directly to the cache found near the hikers. What link tied this Cold War research to a modern commercial entity? In 2018, Rheinmetall Industries, a German aerospace firm, secured a partnership with the Russian Defense Ministry to develop neurofeedback helmets for pilots. Internal emails leaked in 2022 reveal that Rheinmetall's chief scientist, Dr. Klaus Meyer, requested field data on toxin-mediated neuromodulation from the Special Operations Division. The request cited a budgetary allocation of 2.4 billion rubles, the same figure from the Vogon memo. A later interview with a former SIP operative disclosed that the Azaria program aimed to commercialize mind control technology for law enforcement markets worldwide. How did a secret Soviet experiment resurface as a corporate venture? The pivot arrives when forensic analysis of the toxin's isotopic signature matches a synthetic compound patented by Rheinmetall in 2017, not a natural plant extract. This means the poison was manufactured, not harvested, and deliberately administered. Further, the Azaria 42 vial contained a microdrone capable of dispersing nanoliter droplets of the toxin into the air, effectively turning the ridge into a toxic cloud. The drone's flight log shows a launch at 2:17 Universal Time coordinated on June 15, exactly when the hikers reported the loss of GPS. What does this mean for the hikers, and for anyone walking those mountains today? The final reveal, Project VOGON never ended with a Cold War experiment, it evolved into a covert corporate test that used 9 unsuspecting hikers as guinea pigs, delivering a synthetic neurotoxin via a drone to prove that mind control could be weaponized without a single shot fired. Now we must ask, was this an isolated betrayal, or the tip of an iceberg where private firms are repurposing Soviet psychotronics for profit? One theory suggests the incident was a rogue operation, a lone cell within the Special Operations Division acting without orders, hoping to sell the results to the highest bidder. Another posits a coordinated venture between the Russian Ministry and Rheinmetall, where the hikers were a deliberate sacrifice to validate a product for export to authoritarian regimes. The third view sees the episode as part of a broader, state-sanctioned program, Zarya, intended to embed neurocontrol technology in civilian surveillance systems worldwide. I think the evidence points to a calculated collaboration, the budget memo, the synthetic toxin, the drone's launch timestamps, and the direct orders from Colonel Alexeyev all converge on a planned, high-level experiment. The hikers were not accidental victims, they were the first public proof that a lethal, invisible mind control can be deployed from the sky. If you could redesign the budget line to hide an experiment, would you choose a scientific grant or a covert operation? Your answer might determine what hidden projects remain undiscovered in the shadows of history. The next day the files resurfaced, this time buried under a different codename, Operation Aurora. A forensic analyst, Elena Kovalenko, discovered the same encrypted handshake that had opened the drone's command channel in the earlier logs. This handshake, however, was not Russian at all. Its signature matched a proprietary protocol used by a clandestine branch of the United Nations Institute for Disarmament Research, known only as the Eclipse Unit. The revelation sent shockwaves through the investigative community. The very agency tasked with preventing the spread of weapons of mass destruction had inadvertently become a conduit for a weaponized mind control experiment. The twist deepened when an anonymous whistleblower, codenamed Spectre, sent a video of a high-level briefing held in Geneva. In the footage, a senior diplomat, identified as Ambassador Marisol Ortega, addressed a room of multinational representatives, describing Project Horizon as a preventive measure against extremist indoctrination. She argued that, by subtly modulating neural patterns via airborne nanoflakes, societies could be nudged toward compliance without the need for overt coercion. The presentation was punctuated by a slide that read, "Ethical Considerations, Transparent Deployment versus Covert Implementation." The implication was unmistakable: there were factions within the global governance structure that saw the technology not as a weapon, but as a tool for social engineering. If the documentary lens has been trained on conspiracy, we must also entertain more mundane explanations. One plausible scenario is that a rogue industrial consortium, Rheinetech and a subsidiary of a Western defense contractor, exploited a diplomatic loophole to test the nanoflakes on unsuspecting civilians, masquerading the trial as a joint Russian-German research project. In this view, the presence of the UN protocol could be a red herring, a cybermask applied to disguise commercial intent. The budget memo, after all, could have been forged by a skilled financial forger seeking to conceal a private venture from the oversight committees that routinely audit defense expenditures. Another alternative lies in the realm of misdirection. The synthetic toxin found in the hiker's bloodstream may not have been a neurocontrol agent at all, but a novel antiviral compound under development for a pandemic threat. Its neuromodulatory side effects could have been an unintended consequence of rapid synthesis, leading to a cascade of hallucinations and seizures that mimic deliberate mind control. The drone's release of the nanoflakes could have been a false flag, an emergency dispersal of a pathogen-neutralizing agent meant to protect surrounding populations from an unseen biological hazard. We must also consider the human factor. Colonel Alexeyev, whose orders had seemed unequivocal, suffered a sudden cardiac event 2 weeks after the incident, leaving his official testimony fragmented. His last recorded interview mentions a ghost operation, a term he used to refer to a shadow program shielded even from his own chain of command. If Alexeyev was being coerced, or if he was a pawn in a larger game of political leverage, his directives may have been the tip of an iceberg that never fully emerged. Sifting through these tangled narratives, the mosaic that emerges is one of layered deception. The evidence points not to a single mastermind but to a confluence of actors, rogue state operatives, profit-driven corporations, well-meaning but ethically compromised bureaucrats, and perhaps an unwitting scientific community caught in the crossfire. The most parsimonious explanation may be that Project Horizon was a multinational pilot program sanctioned by a secret coalition of powerful interests, designed to test the feasibility of remote neuroinfluence under the guise of counterterrorism. The hikers, unfortunately, became the first test subjects, their tragedy a grim proof of concept that the technology works, though at a cost far beyond any projected benefit.